Why do some people walk into a room and immediately feel something is wrong, but stay anyway? Why do you sometimes sit inside a conversation, a relationship, a situation, and feel yourself slowly disappearing, but tell yourself you're overreacting? Why does it take months, sometimes years, before you finally admit to yourself, that place was destroying me? Here's the truth. The most dangerous places you will ever enter in your life, they don't have warning signs on the door. They don't announce what they are. They feel familiar. Sometimes they feel like home. And that is exactly what makes them so deadly. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli understood something that most people spend their entire lives trying to figure out. The threat that smiles at you is always more dangerous than the one that doesn't. Most people never see this. They think danger looks like a raised voice, like an obvious enemy, like a burning building. But the places that truly ruin people, psychologically, emotionally, socially, they look like safety. They feel like belonging. They dress themselves in the language of love, loyalty, and opportunity. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already given them years. In this video, I'm going to show you 7 of those places. Not physical locations, psychological ones. The environments, relationships, and systems that are designed, whether the people inside them know it or not, to keep you small, confused, and emotionally dependent. And there's one on this list that almost nobody talks about. We'll get to that later. When I tell you what it is, you're going to think about someone specific, and you'll understand something you've been sensing for a long time. Stay with me. Most people assume that the dangerous places in life are obvious. They believe that if something is hurting them, they'll feel it clearly. They'll know. They'll leave. But Machiavelli wrote something that cuts through that belief completely. He said, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." Think about what that actually means. It's not that people are stupid. It's that people are present-focused. They feel what's directly in front of them, the comfort, the familiarity, the small moments of warmth. And they let that override the deeper pattern happening underneath. You don't stay in a dangerous place because you're weak. You stay because you're human, because you're wired to find safety in what's familiar, even when the familiar thing is quietly breaking you. Here's what most people don't realize. The 7 places on this list have something in common. Every single one of them operates through the same mechanism. They make you feel like leaving would cost you more than staying. That's the trap. That's how it works. And by the time you understand it fully, most people have already paid a price they can never get back. We'll get to the most important one later, the one that almost nobody names. And when we do, everything else on this list will make even more sense. Place 1. The room where your silence is mistaken for agreement. There's a room you've been in. It might have been a workplace, a family dinner table, a friend group, maybe a relationship. And in that room, there was a version of you that stopped speaking. Not because you had nothing to say, but because every time you spoke, something subtle happened. Someone talked over you. Someone smiled and changed the subject. Someone made a small joke that put you just slightly beneath the rest. And over time, without anyone formally announcing it, your voice became background noise. Here's what most people don't realize about this place. The silence isn't the problem. The silence becoming permanent is the problem. Psychologists call this social suppression, a pattern where a person repeatedly encounters environments that penalize authentic expression until the brain begins self-censoring automatically. You don't even notice it happening. you just gradually stop having opinions. Stop offering ideas. Stop existing loudly. And the people in that room, they didn't necessarily plan it, but they benefit from it. Your quietness makes them more comfortable. Your absence of challenge makes them feel more certain. Your lowered presence raises theirs. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote that a prince who surrounds himself with people afraid to speak the truth will eventually be destroyed by the lies he never heard. But here's the direct version. For you. If you are in a room where your silence is taken as agreement, where your absence of protest is read as endorsement, you are not in a conversation. You are in a performance, and your role has been cast without your consent. That is not a coincidence. That is not just the personality of those people. That is a carefully maintained dynamic, and it will continue as long as you remain inside it. Place 2. The relationship that only needs you when it's bleeding. Consider what happens when someone appears in your life, only during their worst moments. At first, it feels like trust. It feels like they chose you. Out of everyone, they come to you when things fall apart. And that feels like meaning. But watch what happens when things are going well for them. They go quiet. They disappear back into their own world. The calls stop. The messages slow. You find yourself checking your phone, wondering what you did wrong, when you did nothing wrong at all. This is not a relationship. This is a maintenance arrangement. You are not their person. You are their emergency contact. There is a difference. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are." Look at this for what it is. When someone only surfaces during their pain, when you are consistently the one absorbing, the one listening, the one holding them together, and when their stability returns and you hear nothing, that pattern is not accidental. They won't admit it, but your calm is their resource. Your emotional availability is the thing they mine, and they have learned, because you taught them, that you will always be there when they need to withdraw from that mine. Think about that for a second. You have trained someone to take from you by never making the cost real enough for them to notice. If you've been through this, you know the feeling. That specific loneliness of being someone's anchor, while slowly losing your own. The dangerous place here is not the person. It is your continued willingness to be available in a dynamic that runs in one direction only. Place 3. The group that punishes growth. Have you ever noticed that the moment you started changing, really changing, certain people around you became uncomfortable? Not loudly, not with confrontation, quietly, subtly. The energy shifted. The jokes got a little sharper. The support got a little thinner. The conversation started pulling you back toward who you used to be, rather than forward toward who you were becoming. That is not a coincidence. It is strategic. Here's the thing. When you grow, you become a silent accusation. Your progress forces people to confront the fact that they haven't moved. And the ego does not tolerate that kind of confrontation without a fight. So instead of growing themselves, which would require real discomfort, they work to return you to the level where you no longer make them feel behind. They do it through small behaviors. Watch for them. They minimize your progress. Oh, lots of people do that. They reframe your ambition as arrogance. You've changed. Said not as a compliment. They surface old versions of you, stories from before you started changing, jokes that remind you, and everyone watching, of who you used to be. If they do this consistently, they are not protecting you from becoming too big for your boots. They are protecting themselves from having to look at what they haven't done. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by our judgments about them. The group that punishes your growth is not disturbed by your success. They are disturbed by what your success means about them. And here is where it gets even deeper. The reason this environment is so dangerous is that it uses love as the mechanism. You don't want to lose these people. They're familiar. They might be family. And so you slow yourself down, not because of their words, but because of the cost of losing their approval. That slowdown is the damage, and it compounds every single year you stay. If this is already making you see your environment differently, hit the like button and subscribe. Not for me. For the next person the algorithm might show this to. Someone who needs to hear this right now and doesn't know this video exists yet. Place 4. The system that rewards your compliance and punishes your clarity. This one is bigger than a single relationship. This is about systems. Every institution, every workplace, every organization, every social structure has an unspoken contract. And the contract reads like this. Perform, agree, don't question the architecture, and we will keep you comfortable. Most people sign that contract without reading it, because the benefits are immediate: security, belonging, a place in the hierarchy. And the costs are slow. The costs only become visible years later, when you look up and realize you've spent a decade being excellent at something that was never aligned with who you actually are. Here's the typology. There are 4 types of people inside every system. The first, those who comply fully and never question. They are rewarded with safety. They are also slowly hollowed out. The second, those who rebel loudly and immediately. They get removed. Their message is ignored because their method made it easy to dismiss. The third, those who pretend to comply while quietly building an exit. These are the ones Machiavelli would call strategic. They understand that you cannot fight the system from inside its most exposed position. And then there is the fourth, the one most people become without choosing it. Those who question too visibly, too soon, before they have built enough independent standing to survive the consequence. They are made examples of, and the rest of the room watches and learns to stay quiet. They won't admit it. But every system benefits from the fourth type being visible, because every person watching them get pushed out makes a calculation and decides that compliance is safer. That calculation is how systems sustain themselves. Through your fear, through the object lesson of what happens to those who see clearly and say so at the wrong moment. Place 5. The conversation that keeps you explaining yourself. There is a specific kind of conversation that is more exhausting than a physical fight. It's the one where no matter what you say, you end up on trial. You explain, they question, you clarify, they doubt, you provide evidence, they move the goalposts, and by the end, you're not even sure anymore what you were originally defending. You just know you're tired. And somehow, mysteriously, you feel guilty. Even though you walked in knowing you did nothing wrong. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a tactic. Gaslighting, at its structural core, is the repeated redirection of another person's confidence in their own perception. It doesn't require malice to function. Some people do it automatically, instinctively, because it works, because it keeps you engaged, because a person who is constantly defending themselves is a person who is not walking away. Here's what most people don't realize. The moment you start explaining yourself to someone who has already decided what they believe, you have already lost. Not because your explanation is wrong, but because explanation was never what this conversation wanted from you. What it wanted was your continued presence inside the discomfort, your sustained effort to prove yourself. That is the currency this dynamic runs on. Seneca once wrote that the greatest enemy of power is impatience. But the second greatest is unnecessary self-justification. The person who explains themselves to everyone is not being honest. They are being controlled. And here is where it gets even deeper. Once you get used to over-explaining in one relationship, you begin doing it everywhere. It becomes your default. You pre-apologize. You soften your statements before you make them. You hedge your certainty to make others comfortable. And you call it humility. But it isn't humility. It's a habit you picked up from a place that punished you for being direct. That conversation shaped you. And it's still shaping you, even in rooms where no one is asking you to justify anything. Place 6. The place inside your own head that someone else built. Have you ever noticed that the voice criticizing you in your own head sometimes sounds like someone else? Not a random someone, a specific one. A parent, an ex, a manager, a person who spent years telling you what you were and what you weren't until their version of you became the version you believed. This is the most dangerous place on this list because you carry it with you everywhere you go. Behavioral psychology has a name for this. Internalized negative schemas. Patterns of self-perception built from repeated external messaging, absorbed over time until they feel like facts rather than stories someone told you. Think about that for a second. The ceiling you feel above you right now. The quiet belief that you are not quite enough, not quite ready, not quite the kind of person who gets what they actually want, was not born inside you. It was placed there. By a person, a series of people, or a system that needed you to believe it. And here is the terrifying part. That person may be gone from your life entirely, years gone, and yet the place they built inside your head is still running, still giving you the same feedback, still applying the same limits, still speaking in their voice when you're about to do something that would have made them uncomfortable. You've already left the room, but you're still living by the rules of the room. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. But you cannot reclaim power over a mind you don't know has been occupied. Seeing this place clearly, naming who built it and when, that is not therapy. That is strategy. Because you cannot dismantle a structure you refuse to look at directly. Place 7. The inner circle that never lets you become more than they need you to be, and now. The one I told you about at the beginning. The place almost nobody names. Not your enemies. Your inner circle. The people closest to you. The ones who know you, who love you in their way, who have been present for the real moments of your life, can also be the ones most invested in you staying exactly as you are. Not out of cruelty. This is important to understand. Not always out of cruelty, out of need. You have a role in their life. You are the stable one, or the funny one, or the one who always has time, or the one who asks nothing and gives everything. And that role works for them. It fits. It's comfortable. And unconsciously, sometimes consciously, they will do small things to protect that role, to keep it intact. Because if you change too fundamentally, their world shifts too. Watch for these 4 variations. The first, they celebrate your failures more genuinely than your wins. Not loudly, but the energy is different. There is warmth in the room when things aren't working for you, and a subtle tension when they are. The second, They know your weaknesses better than your strengths. And they surface them at moments when you are about to take a risk. Not to protect you. To protect the version of you that keeps them comfortable. The third, they speak about your potential in past tense. You could have been. Not to hurt you, because part of them genuinely believes your window has closed. And that belief is contagious if you spend enough time inside it. And then there is the fourth, the one most people never recognize until it is too late. They make love the price of sameness. They don't threaten to leave if you change. They do something quieter. They become slightly colder, slightly more distant, slightly less available. And you feel it, that small withdrawal of warmth. And something in you recalibrates. You pull back from the growth. You return to the familiar version of yourself. The relationship warms again, and you tell yourself it was your own choice, that you weren't ready, that you decided on your own. But you didn't decide. You responded to pressure so subtle it had no fingerprints. That is the most dangerous place, because it wears the face of love, because leaving it feels like betrayal, because the people inside it are not villains. They are people who found a way to meet their needs through your limitation. Machiavelli wrote, "A man who is used to acting in one way never changes. He must come to ruin when the times change." The inner circle that needs you unchanged is quietly preparing you for exactly that. Ruin through stagnation, collapse through comfort, not with malice, with love that doesn't know how to grow. This is what I mentioned at the beginning. The place you'd think of someone specific when you heard it. Are you thinking of them now? Here's the truth. The 7 places in this video are not always loud. They don't usually announce themselves. They feel like normal life. They feel like your life. And that is the point. The goal of every dangerous environment, whether it knows it or not, is to make itself feel like home, to make leaving feel like loss, to make your own discomfort feel like your fault. But here is what Machiavelli understood that most people spend a lifetime missing. The recognition of a trap is not the same as escaping it, but it is the only place escape can begin. You cannot leave a place you haven't named. You cannot protect yourself from a dynamic you've been told is normal. You cannot grow beyond a ceiling you've been convinced is your natural height. So name it. Look at the rooms you're living in, the literal ones and the internal ones, and ask yourself honestly, am I here because I chose this? Or am I here because leaving would require something no one ever told me I was allowed to want? Most people never ask that question. You just did. They won't admit it. But the most powerful thing you can do in a world designed to keep you manageable is to see it for exactly what it is. Not with anger, with clarity. Because clarity is the one thing a dangerous place cannot survive once it has it turned on it. The game has always been played on you. Now you're watching it clearly. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And that is your power. You made it this far. That means something. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell, because every video here is built for one purpose: to make sure you see what others miss before it costs you something you can't take back. Share this with one person who needs it, not for the views, because someone in your life is sitting inside one of these 7 places right now. And this might be the thing that finally names it for them. If this video opened your eyes to something you've been sensing but couldn't find the words for, share it. Subscribe so you never miss what we uncover next. The game is already being played. The only question now is whether you're watching it clearly. I'll see you in the next one. Stay dangerous.